Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Total War Three Kingdoms. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the multiplayer right now, and right now I don't actually like the multiplayer all that much. I do think it's a fun battle system for when you're doing historic, in a certain sense there, but it's not that great when you're doing the romance mode. So typically what people have been doing, and I've been testing this as well, is they'll go into a match here, and what they're going to do is basically they'll take basically two or three Zuchus, and they'll just have like potentially they'll have two of him, then they might have someone else that like they might take Sima Ya, or they might take Kong Rong, or they might take whatever the hell, just as a rounder to get access to different units. But the most important thing is that you have two of these guys. Now, the reason that this guy is so important in the way that people are choosing the game right now is he falls into the champion category, and his particular trait at cap tier. So if we take a look at his abilities here, Stalwart Defender, plus 50% damage resistance, permanent, effect range, infinite, and duration permanent. So he can sort of just have a ton of extra damage resistance on himself there. And it makes it so that's really, really hard to kill the bastard. So that's the one reason. The other reason is that his two active abilities here, Condemned Howl and Earth Shattering Strike, are much, much stronger than the standard ones. The reason that this is sort of balanced out theoretically is that it gives him debuffs to his defenses, but since that sort of circles back around to Stalwart Defender and implies that like he takes twice as much damage from his melee evasion and armor being dropped down, but it doesn't matter too much since he blocks half of that with the damage resistance from Stalwart Defender. So in the end, this guy is the most durable of the generals, and he does the most damage. So typically speaking, he'll win fights there. Now, I have played games where I've taken like three of this bastard, and for some reason, my three of them will like lose against two of the enemy's ones, even if we're both using like Condemned Howl and everything like that. So there's a lot of RNG based around this guy because he's not necessarily like the toughest necessarily. His base stats, like if he gets hit a couple times, he goes down pretty hard, despite the fact that he has that 50% damage resistance. If I have Jiang's shape and have her up at level 3 here, her listed toughness values are actually much, much higher. It's just that her activatable abilities are a lot weaker, and she doesn't have that 50% melee sort of damage resistance there. So this guy's just all around sort of like the best champion. Now, the reason champions are great is because you can just run them into the enemy army, and they're not going to die. They'll be able to sort of beat any unit that I've encountered so far in a 1v1 basis, and that's fair. Like, if you're talking about a unit that costs 1,500, it should be able to actively beat other units, like even the Protector's Heaven 1,150, but like the amount of damage that these guys take from expensive units is kind of like minimal. This isn't just him. If I've got like Zheng Jian, or if I've got like Zhang Yan, or if I've got even if I've got one of the Sentinels or one of the Vanguards like Sun Ren or something like that, they can actually put in some decent work against a full-scale unit. And the champions are the ones that have the most egregious problem, because I've seen them take out like 4 or 5 units of, say, like mounted militia, or even a unit of like 2 Tiger and Leopard cavalry without taking really like any health damage. They're very, very good at taking out and tanking these kinds of units. So often speaking, if you've got these guys and they don't die, then they can actually just wreck multiple units. You can't kill them with ranged units. I've noticed that just ranged attacks don't seem to deal any damage to generals in this game, which is fair enough. I don't necessarily know if you want to just be able to sort of cheese them out with shots. The thing that sort of then leads back to these guys being like so important is that champions' intended role is that they're the ones that are general assassins. They're supposed to be the ones that are really, really good melee attackers that just sort of run up at the enemy general and then kill them. So they're the ones that get in duels. They're the ones that engage in that one-on-one fight against other generals and stuff like that. And they're really, really quite good at that. If you have a champion and they're fighting like a strategist, a vanguard, commander, scholar, veteran, healer, any of those things, sentinel, the champion's going to win. Pretty much, like, I think 9 times out of 10, assuming that you've gotten for the fully upgraded version of it. So this guy's the best champion, and champions are the best archetype. What you're going to generally see is like 2 champions, maybe 3 champions, and then maybe something else. A common one that I've seen is actually Liu Bei, I think, was it? I can't remember if it was Liu Bei, if it was someone else here. There's one of these guys that also has like 50%. Oh, it's not him. I think it might be, was it Yuan Shao maybe? There's one of these guys in the commander tier that also has like 50% damage resistance as well for himself, and makes him quite difficult to get rid of. but I can't remember which one it is right off the top of my head. Regardless, like, these guys are just the sort of nastiest in terms of their ability to deal damage. Their unit selection isn't that hampered either. The champions are actually specialists in using spears and polearm infantry. Polearm infantry in this game are actually quite good, so there's not much of a disadvantage in taking a bunch of these guys. Generally speaking, so the setup that I often see is like some variation of these two guys and then something else. A wall of spears, typically speaking, I'll see some protectors of heaven in a lot of games, although I haven't found them to be like the deciding factor. They're quite a good unit, so I think people are just taking them because they're a good, solid, powerful melee unit there. They're quite good against a lot of things. Some people take ranged units, a lot of people don't, but that's generally speaking the kind of way of things. Now, I've been using this as well. I'm guilty as charged of this, although admittedly, for some reason, my general has never won like the one-on-one in like Zuchu versus Zuchu fight. I've never won it. Even if I've got like good positioning, I've got like backup infantry and stuff like that, and I'm using my activatable abilities, I've lost every single time. It's kind of interesting. But that aside, like, we've got an example of a battle where I'm sort of going along with that here. So let's check out our replays. Now, I do think that to a certain degree, like, CA is very likely to fix this, but to my, in my opinion, this is like the worst, least healthy meta that they've ever had in a Total War game. Like, there's way better they could have done in terms of balancing sort of the units and the generals. The way that the actual structure of the army works as well feels kind of janky here, because it sort of lets you mix and match, but the result of this is that every army ends up feeling fairly similar, especially because some of the best units in the game are ultimately either the... Well, generally speaking, I find the best units for value in the game are just low-tier trash units, so it doesn't matter what general you're taking, because you've got access to those highly efficient low-tier trash units that you can just take a lot of, and they'll be perfectly serviceable in almost any circumstance there. So you don't need, for example, to take a strategist to get access to crossbows, because while crossbows are kind of are pretty good, like, the bows are not exactly that much worse, and you save a little bit of points, and you save the slot for having to take a strategist. Mind you, I've got a strategist over here taking his units of cavalry and his 2 units of archers there, but you know, I'm not entirely sure I remember exactly why I did that. Well, I guess they provide passive buffs to your ranged units if you're going for ranged units, so I should have gone heavier on that if I was going to do that here. But yeah, that's kind of the state of those guys. For cavalry, I often find that the sort of low mid-tier cavalry does perfectly fine, and you can get that with champions, even if you get them to the highest level promotions, stuff like that. And the number of unique units per general is actually quite low. There's a few things, unless you're going for like the yellow turbans, you're generally speaking not going to get too much. One of the other things that's quite weird is that almost every army seems to be able to completely Vanguard deploy, which I'm not really sure I'm a big fan of. I would much rather that more people were constrained to keep their armies in their deployment zones. But, you know, I'm guilty of using that feature plenty of times. It's there, so you might as well use it to a certain degree there. I don't think it's broken or anything. It just makes it feel like the ones that can use it aren't really that special as a result of it. It's more that you're sort of able to use it with whatever the hell, so why it might not even, you might as well not have deployment zones, essentially. You should just allow everyone to have their deployment wherever they want. And you can see that I've deployed in sort of this weird way, he's deployed in sort of this weird way. He's going to try and go for this hill here. And like, the army compositions, because of the way the game is designed right now, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go ahead and do the speed up thing here. Like, we're going to speed ahead here. Like, his Jian Sword Guards, very elite units. His Pearl Dragoons, Dragons, quite good units there. Heavy repeating crossbowmen are capable of doing horrific amounts of damage. Like, if you are able to deal with a unit firing from behind it with heavy repeating crossbows, you can just obliterate them. Now, in this particular case, it's a bad choice because his heavy repeating crossbows have like 100 range, whereas my guys have like 200 with the just standard archers. So I could out-skirmish him. I could actually destroy all his heavy repeating crossbows eventually. But he's just deciding to take the hill anyway. That's probably, you know, it's meh. I mean, like, I'm not going to really be happy fighting him on the hill, but I kind of am going to anyway because I don't really give much of a crap about the actual army composition. All that matters is if I assassinate all those generals, the effect on morale that this presents, even to elite units like the Jian Sword Guards and the Pearl Dragons, actually, so this might have the Guardian ability. There's some units that don't No, this isn't one of them. There's some units in this game that actually don't receive any morale debuffs if your general dies. Apparently this is not one of those units. I don't think this one is either. Yeah, they're immune to terror, but they don't have the proper effect there. So yeah, like my opponent has got fairly decent units, but like their morale is just going to crumble, especially the heavy European crossbowmen. They have no protection against that. The Dread Dragons, like all their cavalry is going to retreat as soon as like their general is dead. So it's not really a healthy state right now where it's just unstoppable generals charging into the enemy generals and just walloping them to death. I think that they definitely need to do something a little bit to change how that sort of works there. I've had games where like I've had walls of Protectors of Heaven, the most elite sort of tier of spear infantry in this game, and they can't block generals charging through them at all, and they don't really deal any damage of generals sort of pulling through them. Like in Total War Warhammer 2, if you had like Phoenix Guard, something like that, and you had a cavalry general trying to pull through Phoenix Guard, he would take actually quite a decent amount of damage. Not in this. These guys take like 0 damage from that. Well, maybe Sima Yi would probably take some damage from that, but I mean, other than that. So my opponent's sort of like thinking he'll use the sort of hill, however he's going to use it there, and he's going to get some like extra damage off of it. I'm just sort of like bringing up Zhuge Liang to get him to potentially to just bait him out to come try and kill him. And then I'm going to countercharge with Zhu Chu, and I'm just going to get both Zhu Chus to pile in on this. And like he's so much more powerful than like any other melee general in this game that it's kind of silly, and they just sort of like bumper cars around because like the pathing when cavalry units are trying to like individually engage individual models does not work all that well, so it's just turning into a clusterfuck. And then I get some cavalry, and I even bring Zhuge Liang to sort of pile in on this as well. Why did I pick the people I picked? I don't know why I picked Zhuge Liang, I just kind of like the guy. So anyway, my opponent's trying to retreat here. He's taken a bunch of damage on his general there, and I have not taken damage on either of my Zhu Chus. They're just that much more powerful that they've taken 0 damage. We're able to chase off Zhuge Liang here. Going to go ahead and just try and deal as much damage as possible. But like I said, like the armies don't matter. He can... like, whatever the hell this is doing is just fine by me. It does not matter one bit. Lu Bu coming in, he's a vanguard, so he's not going to be able to win this either. He's tried to declare challenges to try and change it from 2v1s to 1v1s. I'm perfectly willing to accept it. Lu Bu actually is, like, able to win against Zhu Chu here, almost. If it weren't for the fact that I'm starting off with, like, way more health, he actually would have won. We can actually zoom in a little bit and just check out, like, this stupid-ass fight here that's, like, set on, like, low resolution here. Got Zhu Chu just like waving around his giant stick there and everything like that. But, you know, champions, this is actually where champions are supposed to excel, is like in these sort of duels and stuff like that. So this is fine. Like, me winning these is reasonable, but my opponent not having great counterplay to it is not. Like, my opponent should have better ways to deal with this. And you might be thinking, well, he should run down his army and do that. Well, it doesn't work at the duels. Like, once they're in a duel, these guys are irrelevant. But even if he had done that instead of declaring the duels, the Pearl Dragons don't deal any damage to heroes, really. Not enough to make a big difference. Same with the Jian Sword Guards. And, like, these guys don't do anything. So Zhu Chu's emerged victorious, and now we've got, like, you know, 2 Zhu Chus. This guy's going to beat Lu Bu eventually. And, you know, we're seeing just a million arrows. And look at this. No damage whatsoever. Like, he's basically immune to missiles. These are, like, heavy European crossbows. Like, his horse apparently is just... he's forgotten it exists or whatever the hell, and he's just wandering off with his stumpy legs and all that bullshit. But he's going off to help with this fight with these Jade Dragons. We've got Zhuge Liang and some cavalry and some swordsmen all fighting these Jade Dragons and stuff like that. My opponent's still thinking that he's got this hill position, but doesn't really matter all that much. We got Zhu Chu, again, getting the better of his opponent. I should probably be mounting these guys back up after these, but I really don't care that much. Having one of them go after one of those repeating crossbowmen, whatever, that's fine. This other one's sort of coming. I'm just going to send some cavalry. Like, he's only got 1 general at this point in time left, and he's going to fall pretty soon as well, if I recall. Actually, he might have fallen already. Yeah, he might have actually just fallen. So my opponent's in a really bad spot in terms of all that. He's still firing away at my general, who's running after these heavy European crossbows. This guy's immune to those missiles. The only thing he can try to do is get me in melee combat, but like I said, these units don't beat those generals in melee combat. We're able to get around with the G militia and just swarm them with Saber militia coming up the front here. Like, my opponent really... the actual melee fight here is irrelevant at this point in time, because my generals, even if the fight persisted, would have been able to solo, like, 2 of those units each. it's a really unhealthy state for the game to be in my opinion, and I don't think that this is going to last too long. I'm pretty sure that they will probably patch this and change the balance of it quite substantially. My first opinion of it is really quite simple. Just make it so you can only choose one general from each category. And I'm aware that's going to really cut down on the number of potential sort of combinations you could do, but like if one of the general types is like overbearing and obviously better than the other ones, then there's really no call for taking those guys, the other guys, other than the one that's really good at the time. And this sort of levels out the fact that if you've got a situation where, like, say they change the meta and strategists become really, really dominant, people can't just take like 3 strategists either. It's going to just sort of make that sort of better. And yeah, maybe they shouldn't do this in general. Maybe they should restrict that change to ranked only. And the reason that you would maybe want to keep the ability to do 2 champions is because you maybe want to have Zhen Jiang and her bandit friend and have a double outlaw sort of army there. Or you could even want potentially all outlaws. That would be an interesting sort of change there. But insofar as actually playing the game as using the armies, like this really feels quite hero loaded in terms of how well they perform compared to everything else. And it's mostly the champions that are really, really guilty of that, having both very good single target damage. The other thing that they probably should do is remove the area of effect splash damage abilities from champions and make it so that all of their abilities are more narrowly targeted, and then reduce their unit mass so that they have a much harder time getting through protection type units. So if I've got, like, say, a unit of Protectors of Heaven standing on Lu Xiang or whatever, then he'll be able to stand behind them, and as they're trying to force their way through there, they can't just AoE to kill a bunch of them and get to him anyway, and they can't just sort of mass their way through all the pikes and spears and stuff like that. They'd have to actually fight their way through, which would be a much more difficult proposition under that sort of circumstance, because they've only got really good single target damage, so they'd be pushing through one at a time rather than through like entire waves of them. I think that that's another potential fix that you could do, which, maybe you don't want to go that route because you do still want them to be able to sort of wipe out large numbers in units with their area of effect attacks. Like, they're not the only ones that have them, but if we take a look at some of the numbers here, we can take a look at this guy's and see that he's got Earth Shattering Strike, 9.4 thousand splash damage. So there's probably more to this than like meets the eye, but that's sort of the raw number there. Sun Ren also has, for example, the Flames of the Phoenix here, 3.8 thousand splash damage, as a similar sort of thing, and it's got a shorter cooldown. The problem is that in general, like, having the ability to just instantly pump out 3 times as much splash damage kind of is better than having twice as often, especially in a game where like morale breaks relatively quickly like this one does. So if we're looking at vanguards, if we thought that they were the ones that are supposed to be able to plow into cheap infantry and quickly dispatch them, then Sun Ren's not one that really excels at that. You can even look at Gan Ning or something like that. I'm sorry about the pronunciation, by the way. Like, he doesn't have any area of effect when his is based around like ranged attacks and stuff like that because of horse archers, I'm supposing. But all these sorts of abilities like could have been moved off of champions to other types of ones. Like, maybe you want commanders to be the ones. I don't think you want commanders to be the ones that go in there and do that. Maybe veterans, vanguards, and maybe even sentinels would be better. Sentinels, I think, would actually make more sense if they had something that like massively made them better against cavalry, which isn't really the AoE attacks. But I think vanguard should be the ones that have the ability to push into the enemy really quickly and then just cause a humongous amount of damage against cheap infantry, which to do that is, broadly speaking, the splash damage stuff. So I think that that's kind of the direction I would take. That is peel back those abilities away from champions and move them to someone else, and make these guys much more focused on character assassination. If we take a look at who's actually good at that, Zhen Jiang actually is kind of designed that way. She still has a powerful area of effect ability, but she has the Poison Blade, which is a character assassination ability, and then this Tenacity of Steel makes it so that you're gradually better against killing a general, but that gives them counterplay options because they can get away from you. It also means that she's not like invincible because she doesn't take 50% damage. If we look at Zhang Yan here, he's also got like the fairly weak area of effect one here, Flames of the Phoenix and Binding Fury, so he's got tons of splash damage there. Earthen Rampart, 900% charge resistance. on a large actually area around him. So he's got an interesting ability, but he's not necessarily better against other champions. Like, this is the sort of tier where I would expect him to have kind of like character killing abilities instead of all these ones having these weird like area of effect damage effects against units. Or there's other ways that you could look about it. If you wanted champions to be the ones that are supposed to just individually go through and just Dynasty Warriors it up, like chopping through a whole bunch of people by themselves, then, you know, remove their ability to easily kill other generals, make it so that other generals can fight back a lot more effectively, and make it so that all of their attacks are built around that sort of area of effect type of effect there, instead of making them really, really just good all-around killers or something like that. Anyway, I still think that this game's extremely well made for what it is, but like I said, this isn't really my period of history, so for me it's a little bit tricky to comment on in some senses there. I do like the campaign. I think it's a lot of fun, but this is probably the least fun that I've had in a in the multiplayer campaign in a Total War game in a long time, just because the way they've designed the meta feels so unhealthy right now. So anyway, that's my video for today. I hope you found this enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you guys all next time.